Alright everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started here. This is the demonstration for Waterloo 20. It's going to be included in GMT's new release, Fading Glory. And Fading Glory is going to be a quad pack. It's going to include a brand new Napoleonic 20 game called Salamanca 20. And Steve Carey, who's here tonight, he's the designer of that. There's also going to be Borodino 20, Smolensk 20, and Waterloo 20. So you get 4 games in one package. It's called Waterloo 20 or Napoleonic 20 because you rarely have more than 20 pieces on the map at any one time. And as I said in the YouTube video shot earlier, I was a little skeptical as to how that would actually work in an actual game. So what I'm going to do tonight, being that I'm lacking an actual human opponent, what I'm going to do is just going to walk you through a few turns of how this system works and some of the very interesting decisions that have to be made in the course of the game. First thing we're going to look at is the units themselves. And I mentioned this on the YouTube video, but we're going to go through it again just for clarity if anyone hasn't seen the previous video. Is on the units, for example, let's take the Imperial Guard here. I'm just going to move him around so you can see which guy I'm talking about. He starts in Hex 107. He's got 2 different ratings on him. The rating in the bottom left is going to be his attack rating or combat rating, and the number on the right is his movement rating. Generally speaking, infantry are going to have a movement rating of 2 and a combat rating that could be variable. But they're almost always going to have a movement rating of 2. Some games it might be a little bit different, but that's a general case. You do have artillery in the system, but not in Waterloo 20. I believe it's in Borodino 20, and I know it's in Dresden 20, but there's none in Waterloo 20. The scale is operating above that of any grand batteries here. So all we have here in this game is going to be infantry and cavalry. The cavalry, for example, this guy in Hex 210, that's the 2nd Corps Cavalry, and he's got an attack rating of 1 and a movement rating of 3. It's important to distinguish infantry from cavalry. Cavalry are going to be dudes sitting on a horse. It's important to distinguish them because your cavalry are going to be able to do some special things during the course of a turn. So those are the units, and next thing you want to do is you want to open up the Play Aid window in Vassal, and you're going to do that by clicking on the toolbar button that says Show Hide Play Aid Window. And as always, I seem to always forget to start a log file, so I'm actually going to do that right now. Begin a log file. Give me just a second here to get this done. Alright, there we go. Now we're cooking with gas. Okay, so if you got the Play Aid window open, you're going to see there's a number of different things on there. Has everybody got that open okay?
I'm good.
Alright, excellent. What you're going to look at is turn sequence, upper left-hand corner. This is your sequence of play, and it's real simple. The first thing you're going to have is a random event segment where you're going to draw a random event card and apply the results of that random card draw. The exception is on the first turn, the French, who always go first in Waterloo 20, do not conduct that particular phase. So they're going to actually get skipped at on turn 1. Next thing you do is you do all your movement. Then when all your movement is done, enemy can do reaction with their cavalry. Once that's done, then you engage in combat, and that constitutes your daylight turns. Every 4th or every 5th turn is going to be a night turn. Turn track is actually on the main map, and it's every, looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, every 5th turn looks like it's going to be your night turn. And during a night turn, there's going to be an additional step. First of all, there's not going to be any combat during night, but during a night turn, you're actually going to do night operations. So that's step 5 on the turn sequence. That's only applicable during a night turn. The other pieces of information that you have on here is you have a very important morale track on the bottom of the Play Aid. This is a very, very crucial piece of the game. In fact, this is a game within the game. The game ends with a victory if you force your opponent's morale marker to the 0 box. And there's a number of ways that your morale can go up and down, and that is discussed on the morale chart. On the right-hand side, you'll find ways that your morale can go up or down and the circumstances which govern your morale going up or down. At certain points, you'll be spending morale in order to do various things. That's also at the bottom there of the morale chart. And we'll look at those as we move along. I'm not going to go through it in detail now. Also on the play aid sheet, you have the CRT or combat results table. In this game, it's not an odds-based CRT. In other words, you're not going to look at 1-to-1 odds or 2-to-1 odds. You're actually going to look at differential between strength factors. So if you had an attack factor of 4 against an attack factor of 3, then you would fire on the +1 column and so forth. Attacks cannot go above +4 or below -2. So you're pretty much confined to the actual CRT table. And we'll look at what the actual results of that table are as we move along further. Last two charts you have on here are hazardous retreats. We'll explain what those are. Suffice it to say there's a 50-50 chance when you conduct a hazardous retreat that the unit in question will break, but there is also a possibility that he will be safe. Rally table is only going to be used at night unless you get a random event, and that's going to be when you're going to rally broken units. So this, in the physical game, actually comes as a cardstock sheet that you're going to set adjoining to the map. On the map itself, you have a number of different pieces of terrain. Some of the important things you need to notice right away are the locks, or lines of communication. In this game, the French locks are going to be in hexes 104 and 106 on the left-hand side of the map. The Allies are going to have two locks for the Anglo-Allies up in the north, western or northeastern, side of the map in hex 2003 and 2007. And then the Prussians have a lock on the bottom half of the map at hex 412, and then in hex 2012 in the lower right-hand corner they have another lock. Along the map edges, you'll also see that there's dark blue, dark red, and dark gray hex sides. That's where your reinforcements are going to enter for the French, for the Anglo-Allies, and for the Prussians respectively. So they can only enter along where those dark shaded hexes are. Terrain-wise, as far as features, you have most of the map is going to be open terrain or clear terrain. You also have forest, woods in like hex 505. That's going to be a forest hex. The TEC will govern the actual results of what that terrain does. So forest hexes are going to be give a boost to the defender in combat, and it's also going to slow down or actually stop anybody that's moving into that hex. You have towns, for example, like Ligny, Gembloux, Catebras. These are all towns. The town of Catebras and Ligny have hash marks around it which indicate that they are objectives for the Allies to capture. If the Allies are in possession of one of those during a night turn, they're going to get a morale boost, or this could be the, let me make sure I check this right. They are going to get a, the French will lose morale if they don't occupy those. For each enemy objective hex occupied, it says on the morale table, then there's going to be a -1 to your morale check. So if the Allies are in both Ligny and Catebras during the first night turn, the French will lose 2 morale. So those things are kind of a big deal. For the Allies, Waterloo, the hex itself in hex 1702, and Wavre in hex 1709, those are also objective hexes. If the French occupy those during a night turn, then the Allies will lose 1 morale for each such hex. Last but not least is Hougoumont in hex 1502. That's a fortified hex. Make sure I got the terminology right. Yeah, it's a fortified hex. Zones of control are not going to extend into that hex, which is going to have some interesting results. And also it's going to go a +2 to the defender, and the defender retreats 1 fewer hexes. So it's very, very difficult to force an enemy out of Hougoumont. It's not an objective hex, mind you, but it is a fortified hex. Now, let's go ahead and start things off. First thing I want to say is every unit in the game has a zone of control. Zone of control being the hexes surrounding a unit. So, for example, this Prussian boy right here in hex 510, he projects a zone of control into hexes 509, 610, 611, 511, 411, and 410. As soon as you enter an enemy zone of control during your movement, you must stop and you are frozen in place. If you begin your movement phase in a zone of control, you may not move out of it. So here at the very beginning of the game, the French always go first in Waterloo 20, but you'll notice that there's several units that are frozen. This unit here, the 4th Corps, 3rd Corps, and 2nd Corps are all frozen in place due to enemy zones of control. So they're stuck. They can't do anything. They're frozen in place. They're not maneuverable. If you're in a zone of control, something very important happens during combat. You are forced to attack the enemy units that you're in if you're in their zone of control, you are forced to attack them. Now, if they don't project a zone of control into your hex, you're not compelled to attack them. And Steve, you can actually correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I believe that's actually the correct terminology there. All right, so any questions so far on any of this stuff? So far, this is all pretty much basic meat and potato stuff if you play war games.
I'm good.
Okay, Steve clarified for me, there is no zone of control between adjacent towns. So if you have two towns adjacent to one another, there's no ZOC between them. For example, Le Haye-Saint, Mont Saint-Jean, and Waterloo, those are all adjacent to one another, so the ZOCs are not going to apply between those hexes. There's a lot of actual subtlety there. So I'll tell you what, let's go ahead and just get rolling here. I'm just going to go ahead and make some moves as the French, just for grins. Here's another opening option that the French could employ. I'm going to take the second, actually this guy should start here. Sorry, I was pushing things around before you all guys joined. The setup locations are actually marked on the map by little blue diamonds and little gray and red diamonds. This is the actual starting position as we know it right now. So actually at the start, only 3rd Corps and 4th Corps are frozen in place due to ZOCs. So we're going to go ahead and leave those guys there. And then to open things up, I'm going to take the French 2nd Corps that's in hex 405, and I'm going to move him 2 hexes, and he stops there. That's going to give me a pretty good attack there on the Prussian 1st Corps. Next, I'm going to go ahead and do something a little aggressive. We'll see what happens with it. This could backfire, but I'm going to go ahead and move these 2 cavalry units like so. And they have to stop once they encounter the Prussian 3rd Corps. And they're both going to attack, beat up on him. Next, I'm going to take the Imperial Guard. Now, there's no stacking in the game. You can move through friendly units, but you cannot end your move stacked with somebody. So I'm going to take the Imperial Guard. And, well, before I do that, let me go ahead and take the 4th Corps Cav. And I'm going to move them 1, 2, and 3 to kind of screen the north. Next, I'm going to take the Imperial Guard. I'm going to move him 1, and then I'm going to move him 2. Now, the Imperial Guard, you'll notice, has a red attack factor and a red movement factor. Now, this is one of the older games with older graphics, so there's been a few changes as far as the graphics go concerning elite units. Elite units in the game have red movement and or attack factors. Now, the Imperial Guard has a red attack factor, which means that in combat, if he's forced to rout, he's going to have a minus modifier to his rout roll. So there's a chance that the rout is not going to hurt him as far as French morale is concerned. And I'm sure you'll see what I mean by that shortly. Now, the movement rating is red, indicating that when he in order to move into a combat position, if he moves adjacent to an enemy, you have to spend a morale to do so. That's called committing the guard. And so if you look at the morale chart on the player aid sheet, you're going to see that you can spend a morale point to commit the guard. Movement of a guard next to an enemy unit during your movement phase is going to cost you 1 morale unless your morale happens to be in the 1 box on the morale track. And the morale track will say that you can freely commit the guard at that point. So right now the French morale is at 8. I'm going to spend that morale and move it down to 7. In order to make an aggressive push on Ligny early on. Lastly, I'm going to take the 1st Corps up in hex 104, and I'm going to move him along the road. And as long as you move entirely along the road, you can move 1 extra space. So he can actually move 3 hexes as long as he stays along the road, and he'll stop there.